Thank you for attending. I'm super excited you all are here. Just to make sure everybody's in the right spot, we're in the Forum UX Secrets Revealed. Is that right? And if not, stick around because I think there's some good stuff in here, if I do say so myself. Cool, so Forum UX Secrets Revealed, boost productivity and crush error rates. Before we get started, I have to start with the safe harbor notice. You might see some screens in here that are forward-looking, that may not make it into a release. Please don't make any purchasing decisions based on what you see. My name's Chad Bishop. I'm the Senior Manager of Product Design for Workflow Automation, which includes Flow Designer, Playbook Designer, Decision Builder, Action Designer, and then I also have the Mobile Builder products, Mobile App Builder, Mobile Card Builder, and Mobile Publishing. And I've been with the company for about 3 years, or about 2 years, and before that I was with an implementation partner, and I did custom portal implementations for 20 or 30 customers. So I've had about 5 years in the ecosystem. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about defining your audience, then we're going to talk a little bit about tailoring your content to the audience, then we're going to talk about how you can use customizing the layouts and the views to improve usability. And then we're going to chat a little bit about offering help, and then at the end we're going to have some links and references that everybody can use. So oftentimes when creating a form, I've been in this position, we are thinking about the information we need, and we're creating a form as an information capture device. And I want to propose that that's kind of a one-sided way to think about it. That really, a form is an asynchronous conversation. So you need information if you're creating the form, and the user that's going to use the form needs to be able to submit the information, which means they need to be able to understand what's being asked of them. So if we think of it as an asynchronous dialogue, it's a combination of what the business needs and what the user understands. And when you think about it that way, you can start to kind of approach your form creation in through a slightly different lens. So why is Forum UX important? And I presented this last year. The numbers are still valid, probably larger now, but I wasn't able to get more updated numbers. But we had an average of 54 million catalog item requests in 1 month last year across the whole platform, across the whole ServiceNow ecosystem. If you think about the cost of that, if you have, on average, your employees making $100 or $60 an hour, that's about $1 a minute, right? So if you're able to reduce your form completion time by just 1 minute across 54 million form submissions, that will be a resulting cost savings of $54 million. So that's why Forum UX is so important and so scalable. The more people you have interacting with your forms and submitting forms, the more important it is to reduce the time it takes to complete that form. And usability and user experience is a great way to do that. So what happens when dialogue breaks down? What causes that completion time to lengthen? Well, users lose time trying to figure out what the information means. So time is lost. They submit incorrect or incomplete information, which requires now a manual intervention to try to close the loop and close the gap of the information that's not been provided. And then that also can result in resubmitting additional information. So now they have to do the same work twice, which gets very expensive. And on the administration side, on the agent side, on the fulfiller side, they lose time doing things manually that could have been automated. If the right, the garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, right? If the right data gets inputted to begin with, then they can start to see patterns in processes and they can add the automations. They have to do follow-up requests, which I mentioned a second ago, right? They have to circle back with the original submitter. They have to ask for additional information or clarity. And oftentimes they have to reroute. So if the wrong form gets submitted or the wrong information on the form, then maybe it ended up at the wrong person's desk, and now they have to send it somewhere else, which takes time. And then lastly, they lose traceability. And the way they lose traceability, and the most expensive problem that can be created with poor form UX, is they don't use the form at all. They submit via email, right? They go back to their default. They go to Slack or Teams or email, and now you're stuck in a very manual, very interactive process that can be very expensive. And you lose traceability. So now you lose the structured data. You lose the ability to actually use that information over time to improve your processes. So what are the principles? Like what are the foundational concepts that we can kind of use as a guiding North Star to inform our decision making and inform our priorities? The one is keep it simple. Like, we'll talk about this in a second. We'll go in deeper into each of these in a second. But one is keep it simple. Try to think of it from the user's perspective. Try to simplify the level of complexity of the information you're asking for. Reduce technical jargon. Kind of a play off the first one, but oftentimes the platform architecture makes its way to the form experience. And that's a lot of times where that disconnect happens between the agent or the platform admins and the end user's knowledge, skill, and expectations. And then keep questions consistent. Once you find things that work, try to, and the user, and you establish patterns and the users come to expect certain patterns, try to leverage those patterns everywhere so they're not having to relearn. So firstly, get to know your users. Try to, if this is a dialogue and you're talking to somebody asynchronously, try to understand the knowledge, skill, and perspective and priorities of the person that you're asking information from. Since it's asynchronous, it's even more important to be as clear as possible the first time. So clarity of information being requested at the beginning is the most important piece. Because you don't want to have the follow-up communication. You don't want to have the rounds, the manual rounds of iteration. And then take an inclusive approach. So once you identify your user segment, try to think of the lowest common denominator in that user group. And because if you solve for them, you'll solve for everybody else in that group as well. So try to simplify it as much as possible. So now we're going to go in a little bit into like form content, form best practices. The number one solution is to not have a form at all. So what does that mean? If we look at the rise of pre-filled forms, right? LinkedIn has the ability to apply with LinkedIn now. You click one button and it looks in the system and it pulls that user's data and it populates the fields. Or Amazon, buy now with one click, right? The biggest success story in form usability in the last 15, 20 years. Like it drove revenue because it saved all of that data and allowed them to complete the transaction with a single click. So whenever possible, try to use the platform and use the system to anticipate what information might need to be populated and populate those elements of the field automatically, which will dramatically reduce form completion time. Next, use the right field for the job. So there's this concept in user experience called cognitive overload, cognitive processing. You want to keep it simple. There's a famous book called Don't Make Me Think. So one way that we can do that is to use the right field based on the type of information that you're collecting. So if it's two choices and it's a single select, use a yes-no, a binary toggle yes-no response. It keeps it very simple for the user. If it's multiple choices, but a single select and it's relatively short, use a radio button. So radio buttons, we have this thing called heuristics, right, in UX also, where there are these mental models and these common patterns that users have come to expect in their digital experiences everywhere, right? And so when we see a radio button, we automatically know exactly what they're looking for. If it's the same list but it's multiple select, use a checkbox. So users are trained to know that when they see checkboxes, it's check all that apply, right? And then lastly, if there's complexity and it's a long list, a longer list, multiple choices, use a drop-down. Now, a lot of times what we do is we default to the drop-down, right? It's kind of the easy go-to, like, we'll just do a drop-down in there. It's choices and it's a choice list. But there are other ways to simplify the UX when possible. And I'm publishing a blog article and I have some links at the end that go into some more details. These are just 4 common types, but there are more. Another way that you can improve usability on forums is this concept of chunking of the form itself. So you can group items by category. So when users see that this information is grouped together, and there's a header that denotes the section, it gets them in the mindset of, oh, this is the type of information I need to provide for this area. So it kind of gives them guidance and it gets them thinking about that content group. Another thing you can do is break longer forms into wizards or steppers using a stepper component. So you can actually chunk it by the step that they need to go to. And this is really valuable for them because they know how far they have to go. They know how close they are to completing it. So it's a much better alternative than just showing a infinite scrolling form that feels very overwhelming. And by doing this, you'll also be able to add some metrics, right? Like, where's the fall off happening? Where's the error? Where are the errors being introduced? Oh, step 2. So we seem to have a lot of errors on step 2 or step 3. So it gives you a way to kind of target some usability problems and inform your future decision making when you try to make it better. And then lastly, I didn't have a graphic for that. Lastly is hide unnecessary content. So all content might not be relevant to all users. Or a specific selection or selections on the page. So use variables, right? So if they have a multiple choice selection and based on that choice they have additional information, use that multiple choice as a fork in the road to kind of hide the rest of the irrelevant content and only show them the content that you need based on that specific choice. So that really declutters the form and really simplifies it. And then lastly, when complexity is irreducible, offer help. So there are all kinds of ways that you can layer on helper content to the form itself. You can provide additional descriptions. So, open text, open format text to help them understand what that content is specifically asking for. You can add tooltips or you can add hint text. So if they see a section header or a question, they can mouse over it and they can see that little tooltip pop up that gives some additional clarification of what you're looking for. You can use, as I mentioned earlier, pre-filled info or default info. It's still editable. You're just doing your best to anticipate what they might be putting, or either what that specific user might want to put there, or what most people that submit the form put there. So you can set a default up that just, if it's correct, they can just skip it, and if not, they can actually edit it. And then lastly, you can link to additional content. So you can link to a knowledge article. You can link to anything else that might help them get more information without having to go look for it, and will improve self-service. The key here, though, to point out is that this learnable layer, this extra learnability layer, it really just fixes symptoms. So it doesn't fix the underlying usability problem, which you should always try to fix first. It only adds a layer of clarification and explanation and documentation, but really you should try to improve the core usability before layering on the helper text. And then lastly, continuously test and improve, right? Find a way to qualitatively and quantitatively identify the problems, identify the reasons for the problems, make an improvement, and then measure it, right? This is how we are able to get buy-in to be able to we're all probably very resource constrained. We're all probably making these decisions on the fly. We often don't know what the actual business outcome is, but this is a way to be able to measure it, prove that it's, well, so it's a leading and a lagging indicator. It's leading because it gives you the ability to identify problems, identify the reasons of the problems, identify how frequently the problem is occurring so you can prioritize the problems. And then it also, on the back end, gives you the ability to determine if what you tried to do actually resulted in the outcome that you hoped it would. And then you can use that information to inform your next round of revisions and your next iteration. The qualitative way can seem overwhelming, right? Like user interviews seems like an infinitely scaling resource problem. But my recommendation is start small. Just try to find a representative group of users that even represent that lowest common denominator that you might be trying to solve for, and just have a few conversations with them. But you can start small, keep it light and iterative. The key is to keep it light and iterative, otherwise these problems can scale and the commitment can scale, the time commitment. And then the impact is it's scalable, right? You fix a form once, and now for weeks and months and years, you will see the productivity benefit of that form improvement. And then lastly, this is the end, we have some additional resources. We have Now Create, which is a comprehensive experience guide that we've published through the enablement team. It's a great reference doc. I wouldn't try to consume it all at once, but if you're trying to learn about qualitative measures, you can click in here and you can find out that specific thing, or you want to learn about heuristics, you can learn about that. So you can kind of dig into it as needed. And then I have a link to the heuristics evaluation content if you want to use that to identify some usability issues. And then lastly, for the first time this year, we're actually recording all of these sessions, and we're actually going to publish them all on the on the Knowledge site. So you can have actually access to all of these sessions, even ones that were full, after Knowledge. You'll be able to go and watch any of these for the first time, or again, if you want to get some more information. And then I will publish this presentation to a blog article on the community, so you can all click these links, download it, use the slides for whatever you need. And that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.